Hey guys, today we're going to replace the bearings on this kind of vintage Maytag Neptune front load washer. This one is the model number MAH5500 BWW, and this one I've already tested, works perfect other than it has a noisy bearings. I'm going to show you how to disassemble it, remove the spin basket, change the bearings, and put it all back together. The kit that you're going to need is the seal kit 12002022, and you're also going to need to buy the front and rear bearings. One thing that's pretty important is that a lot of people, especially if you're shopping on like eBay, Amazon, or some of those other internet places, the bearings are junk. Like, you want to stay away from like the no-name kind of Chinese bearings. I buy the SKF bearings. These are, generally these are made in Germany, although I think these are made in France. These are really good bearings. They're very high quality. This is the only bearing that I use for all of my bearing jobs. They're not expensive. These are very, these are only like dollars more than the cheapest one that you could find. If you guys are interested in doing this job, I'll actually have this complete kit for sale, either on my website or on eBay. I'll put a link in the description, and you don't have to worry about it. You're going to get both really good bearings and a complete kit, and with this video you should be able to tackle it no problem. So let's get started. So the first step is to open the door and locate the screws that hold the hinge to the body of the washer, and you want to unscrew both of them on the top and the bottom. Once you get both screws removed, you simply get the door, grab it, and pull up a little bit, and it should slide out nice and easy. You'll find two more screws on the other side, here and here, so you want to remove those too. Once you have all four screws off, this front cover will just pull with a little bit of effort. You want to get it down to about a 45-degree angle, and then you should be able to lift and pull it right out without too much trouble. And then just move it to the side. The next step is going to be, we're going to find these 5/16 screws, and we're going to remove, there's going to be 6 of them all together. So let's take care of that. It also helps if you want to loosen these braces. You could just move them off to the side to get them out of your way. Once we get these screws out, we're going to go to the top and take the soap lid door off, and that just comes off with 4 Phillips screws. Now that we're all set with that, we could lift the top up. The next step is we're going to remove the lid lock assembly. That should come off with 2 5/16 screws, and then there's 2 more 5/16 screws over here, and then we should be able to remove the door boot assembly. Now that we got those screws out, the last thing we need to do is we need to actually remove the bellow so we can remove this part. To remove it, there's a spring at the top here. There's a spring right here. It's just basically held on by tension, and we're just going to remove this spring, and that way we can remove the door gasket without any issue. Once you remove all that, the last thing to do is make sure you take your little drain hose off the bottom here, and that you could just pop off, and then this whole thing should just come right out, and move it to the side. Okay, so the next step is to remove this tub cover, and this is pretty easy. It's got these little tabs that are holding it in place, and the best way to do it is just to take a flathead screwdriver, and you want to get kind of right in the middle and just kind of twist your screwdriver, and they should pop out without too much trouble. Once you get all these off, this should just come right out. And there you have it. This would be a good time to clean this in the sink if you are so inclined to. This machine is relatively clean, but it could definitely use a pretty good cleanup. Okay, so the last step before we can pull this tub off is we're going to remove the back panel, which comes off with 4 1/4-inch screws, and then we're going to remove the nut that holds the pulley on the back. So this is going to be a little bit tricky because you have to undo this bolt and try and keep the pulley from moving too. So try and grasp it with one hand and then turn it. If you can't get it, you could always wedge something in between the pulley and the basket, but just make sure it's nothing like metal, because you obviously don't want to break the tub. But before you take this bolt all the way out, it would be a good time to pull the belt off, and you could just rotate the drum and slide it off just like that. The pulley should just wiggle right out, and then we're in good shape. So this is the tricky part. A lot of times this spin shaft that's hooked up to the tub will not come out very easily, and sometimes you have to persuade it. The trick is to not use like a metal hammer. Like, you want to use a hard rubber mallet and just whack it a couple of times. Hopefully you break it free. If it doesn't come free with that, you could use a block of wood. Just make sure you protect this spline shaft, because once you mushroom it out, you're not going to get the pulley off, and you might as well just throw away the machine. So let me grab a rubber hammer and let's see what we can do. Okay, I got it to move, and that's all you need it to do, is just move. We're going to go scoop it out from the front, and it should slide out without any problems. Well, and there you have it. Let's get a closer look. So this is where our bearing, well, this is our seal first, but our bearing is right behind it. And the front bearing is the one that I'm pretty sure went bad. Overall, this tub is not as gross as I thought it was going to be, but we'll give it a quick wipe down before we put it back together. So we need to pull this seal piece out, and then we'll kind of get started on the bearings. Now the bearings are going to be kind of tough. You basically have to beat them out. Let me pull the seal out, and then we'll see if we can get the bearings. Oh, jeez. Alright, so this is really stuck in there, but I got it. Yeah, this is the bearing. It just barely went bad. This was not exactly screaming, but... Okay, so the next step you're going to need is a small handheld sledge. Which I have my trusty, I believe this is a 3-pound sledge. And then you need a piece of steel, like a rod or a piece of rebar, whatever you could find that's as solid as possible. And once you look in this hole, you'll see the back piece of the other bearing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to push the back bearing out first, and then we'll go on the other side and push the front bearing out. And we're just going to tap it out, a little bit more than tap it out with the hammer. Before you actually get started on this, if you have ear protection, you should put it on, because it gets pretty loud when you're inside this drum beating on it. It's really loud. Just trust me on that one. So definitely get some good ear protection. That came out super easy, so I'm going to go on the other side and I'm going to push this bearing out. And so when you're done, this is what you should be left with. You should be left with a seal, one spacer, the rear bearing, and the front bearing. We need to do a little bit of cleaning where these mating surfaces go. And we're going to put a little bit of grease to help these guys slide into place without breaking our backs too much. Now the trick that I do, because obviously you don't want to hammer the new bearing in, what I like to do is I like to take the old bearing and I'll set it on top of the new bearing, and I'll use my hammer to hit on the old bearing, and it'll push in the new bearing. Before we start reassembly, we do need to take care of this part. This is the part that attaches to the back of the spin basket. This is the spider arm and the spin shaft. We need to remove this metal piece. This is part of the seal, and you might have to pry it off with a screwdriver, so let's get that off. Down here there's also a rubber O-ring that we need to pull off too, and then let's clean it up. And then your kit will come with a small tube of Moly Coat, and we're going to rub this onto the shaft area here. I'm going to do a little bit of cleaning to the inner tub, and then we should be ready to put everything back together. We'll let that sit for, well, basically until I'm ready to put it on, and then we'll wash it. Hopefully it'll bleach out some of those stains. If not, I'll order a new one and replace it when it comes in. Okay, so now it's time to figure out which parts we're going to use. So this is the old seal, and as you can see, this one's pretty much a perfect match. So we don't need to use this seal or this plastic piece. These two washers and this bolt are what mounts the pulley back to the shaft. And then we have our front and rear bearings. Basically what you want to do is you want to take your old bearing and sit it on top of the new bearing like this, and then you could hit the old bearing without fear of damaging the new bearing. Ear protection. You'll know this bearing is in all the way when you see this lip. It'll sit just below the lip of this inner lip over here. I know it's kind of hard to see, but you'll know what I'm talking about when you're doing it. Now, it doesn't have to be like 1000% in there. Once you get the tub in and you torque down the bolt in the back, that'll squeeze it the last millimeter or so that it needs to go. You don't want this center collar to get pinched, because then you'll have a hard time getting the shaft in. So now we're going to install the seal. We're in the home stretch. Let's get the tub back in and let's start bolting everything back together. Cool. Now we're going to draw it in and get everything nice and tight. So you want to get it pretty tight, almost to the point where you feel like you're bowing in this washer. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that it's seated all the way. So undo it and hold the pulley and remove the bolt. If you're flush, if the pulley is flush with the shaft, then you're in. I got about 1 more millimeter to go, so I'm going to give it a little bit more and then I'll be done. And then let's slide the belt on. And then we're just going to reassemble everything. Okay, so I let this door gasket sit for 24 hours in a bucket of bleach and water, and as you can see, it did a pretty good job. It's not perfect, but it's certainly a lot better than what it was. So if yours is not as disgusting as this one was, you probably have much better results. Otherwise, you can just order one on eBay. They don't make, Maytag doesn't make these anymore. They're discontinued, so you'll have to buy an aftermarket one. And I don't know if those are any good or not. So I always opt to save the original one if I can. And just, you know, do the soak method, and it usually gives me pretty good results. So we're all set. I'm gonna put this all back together. I'm gonna do a time lapse on this so you guys don't have to see it step by step, but assembly is obviously reverse of this assembly. And let's test this washer. Alright, well there you have it. So it's all fixed up. I'm going to run it through a test load just to make sure everything worked out pretty well. I definitely recommend washing it, using the machine one time completely empty, just to get any grease or goo that you might have dislodged while taking it apart. Just put like a healthy dose of bleach or something in, or vinegar, or whatever your cleaner of choice is, and let it run through a hot and heavy cycle. And once it's all cleaned out, it should be ready to use. Just check for leaks, make sure you didn't mess anything up. If you did, just take it apart and fix it and put it back together again. Thanks for watching, guys, and stay tuned for the next video.